Välkomna till den här kvällen. Jag heter Svante Weiler. Den här kvällen ägnad minnet av Gerald Nagler. Vi som arrangerar kvällen, Judisk kultur i Sverige, Civil Rights Defenders och Svenska kommittén mot antisemitism. Vi är väldigt glada av att se så många här. Bara det vittnar om att det är minnet av en kär vän, en fin man, en stor inspiratör och för just våra tre organisationer en otroligt viktig stöttepelare vars minne vi är här ikväll för att vårda. Vi hoppas att vi under den här kvällens lopp ska lyckas ge en bild av honom och hans gärning. Gerald var bättre på att fråga andra om saker än att berätta om sig själv. Det är mitt intryck från mina många möten med honom och det är också ett intryck jag fått bekräftat från andra. Han ville hellre tala om gärningen. Men innan vi talar om gärningen i hans anda så vill vi ändå ge en kort bild av Geralds bakgrund. Lite grann av det han inte berättade för mig eller det han har berättat för er. Och då börjar vi från allra första början med en bild på Gerald i den allra första början. Här ser ni honom. Gerald föddes 1929 i Wien som enda barnet till Sigmund och Blanka. Föräldrarna tillhörde de få, måste man säga, som tidigt förstod vart det barkade hän med demokratin och samhället i Österrike. Och insåg att det också skulle kunna få fatala följder för judarna i landet. Gerald och hans tre kompisar insåg att lycka och säkerhet måste man leta efter någon annanstans. Så de gav sig ut på en rekognoseringsresa efter en plats där man kunde hitta ett bättre liv. Målet var ursprungligen England eller USA, men någon av dem, jag vet inte om det var Gerald eller någon annan, hade en släkting i Sverige, så de tänkte vi passerar Sverige får vi se, det kanske finns något där. De fastnade här i Sverige och de 4 kompisarna, utsända av sina familjer, tog in på pensionat Andersson i Stockholm, på Lidingö. Och där blev de kvar, först de 4 kompisarna. 1 år senare kom deras familjer och bodde också på pensionat Andersson. Centraleuropa drar in på Anderssons. Det skulle vara en plats som man gärna hade velat vara med på. Pappa Sigmund byggde upp en mycket framgångsrik agentur för import av klockor som den unge Gerald så småningom, lite äldre än sådär, tog över och fortsatte att driva med stor framgång, men så småningom med allt mindre entusiasm. Men medan den där entusiasmen ändå var full så tvingades han under viss vånda att gå på ett evenemang som då var vanligt i Stockholm, eller vanligt, det fanns i Stockholm, den österrikiska pressbalen. Dit tvingades också, och båda personerna tvingades av sina initiativrika mödrar, en minst lika motvillig ung flicka, Monica Wittgenstein, och där visade det sig att den där balen mot alla odds kunde vara, ja, ni hör vitsen, helt underbar. Gerald och Monica bildar familj. Där ser ni dem. Ser dem från österrikiska pressbalen 1955. Den borgerliga staten var fortfarande i full ordning. Jag har svårt att föreställa mig hur de såg ut när de var motvilliga, de här två, men det måste de väl också ha haft en möjlighet att vara. De bildade så småningom familj. De gemensamma rötterna i Österrike måste ha spelat roll, kanske var det de talade om medan valserna pågick. Också känslan eller erfarenheten av flyktingskap, att vara med flyktingar, vad det var att byta land, måste också ha spelat roll. Camilla, Pamela och Niklas kommer till världen och så småningom kommer många fler till världen. Och så 1982 vid ett besök på banken. Ja, här ser ni gänget. 1982 vid ett besök på banken där företaget hade sina kontakter så antyder Gerald att han är en smula trött på klockorna. Den Pigge bankmannen frågar snabbt om han har lust att sälja. Han hade väl en köpare bakom knuten. Och Gerald slog till direkt. Därmed är vi liksom framme vid den gärning som den här kvällen ska ägnas åt. Men det finns 2 personer som måste nämnas först innan vi kommer fram till den där gärningen och innan vi börjar prata om våra organisationer och Geralds roll för dem. Den ena är en av familjens äldsta vänner, den förre rabbinen i Stockholm, Gerald Nagler, som råkar sitta här framme, som väl insåg att den där fortfarande ganska unga mannen med rätt mycket energi i kroppen var lite för ung för att ägna resten av livet åt sina favorithobbies, som vi har en liten bild på. Åka skidor på vattnet eller rakt ner för snöklädda berg eller spela tennis. Borde inte den unge mannen istället fara till Sovjet för att fara till Sovjet med stöd åt de ryska judar som behövde hjälp? De hade ansökt om att få lämna Sovjetunionen och det kunde de få göra, men efter lång tid, och de blev en sorts flyktingar, inre flyktingar i landet och kallades så småningom refuseniks. Och Morton tyckte att den här unga affärsmannen med sina goda vanor och sina pressade byxor säkert skulle passa perfekt i Sovjet i början på 80-talet. Det finns en till. Den andra personen som såg att det fanns en outnyttjad kraft här hette Gerald Nagler, en amerikansk jude och förkämpe för de mänskliga rättigheterna. Han hade kommit till Sverige för att hitta någon som skulle kunna grunda en Helsingforskommitté här. Den första Helsingforskommittén hade bildats i Sovjet av Andrei Sacharov, sedermera fredspristagare, och hans hustru Jelena Bonner. Och syftet var att kontrollera efterlevandet av det avtal mellan öst och väst som slöts i Helsingfors 1975. Och som vi som var med då inte trodde skulle vara värt bläcket det var skrivet med, eller pappret det var skrivet på. Det visade sig att vi hade fel. Det var värt väldigt mycket mer än så. Kanske framförallt tack vare de här Helsingforskommittéerna. Här i väst var syftet också att konkret stödja dissidenter i Öst- och Centraleuropa i deras kamp för de mänskliga rättigheterna. Ari Neijers förslag föll i god jord, inte minst hos Monica, tror jag. Och man kan misstänka att det var lika mycket eller mer hon som stod för värdskapet vid en lunch den 11 oktober 1982, då ett dokument upprättades, som ni ser här på bilden. Och, det är inte säkert att ni som sitter längst bort kan läsa vad som står där, så jag läser. Det är ett historiskt dokument. Undertecknade har denna dag enats om att bilda en svensk kommitté för bevakning av efterlevnaden av Helsingforsavtalet i vad avser de mänskliga rättigheterna. Helsinki Watch Committee, Lidingö den 11 oktober 1982. Och jag tror att vi har kunnat tyda nästan alla namnteckningar. Om någon är här så får ni gärna ropa närvarande. Det är inte säkert att alla är det, eller jag vet att alla inte är det. Men Lennart Groll, Ann Ramberg, Åke Ortmark, Margareta Ekström, Monica Nagler, Per Westberg, som minns lunchen men inte så mycket mer, skrev han ett mejl till mig, men han erkänner att det är hans anteckning. Magnus Naciel, Knut Arnlund. Sen kan vi inte läsa, så om någon känner igen den här namnteckningen så... Jag vet inte, är det någon som ser det? Ja. Nils Hörberg, Karl Hadding, František Janouš, Inga Gottfär, Gerald Nagler, Jan Gelin, Dorotea Waldenström och Olle Svensson. Här skapades alltså historia. Och då är vi framme vid gärningen. Och nu ska vi ta vid. Vi är framme vid kvällens första samtal. Och då vill jag be Lizzie Scheja och Robert Hård komma upp och ta plats på scenen. Där kommer Lizzie. Lizzie är, som de flesta av er, drivande i judisk kultur. Varsågod Robert, sitta där. Jag sitter på kanten. Lizzie får sitta i mitten som du vederbör. Och Robert var under många år den drivande, eller under nästan 2 decennier, generalsekreterare för det som då hette Helsingforskommittén och som bytte namn till Civil Rights Defenders. Och du var en av Geralds närmaste medarbetare. Så, Lizzie, I'll start with you and I will turn into English because there are some English speaking guests coming up on the panels and you prefer to speak English, Lizzie, I know. When did you meet Gerald?
Well, I met Monica before I met Gerald, and it was 97. I was the cultural attaché at the Israeli embassy, and Monica came to the embassy. She had an idea of doing a program with the Israeli women writers, which we said, I thought it was a great idea. I didn't know who Monica was. It was, But to make a long story short, is that we did this wonderful program, Monica and I, and became friends. And then I was invited to their beautiful residence for some mingle and dinner. I think it was in connection with that, or maybe a bit later. And this was Gerald with his sparkling eyes and his beauty and his openness and warmth. And it was a great evening. Actually, one of the guests sitting there, I have to say that because Gerald introduced me to a lot of people, but there was one gentleman who was sitting next to me in this sofa in the living room, and he was asking me a lot of questions. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? So I got a bit, a little, and I turned to him and I said, so what do you do? And he said, jag är utbildningsminister, Mr. Carl Tam. So, yes, I don't know if Carl remembers it. But Gerald was, this is how I met him. On that occasion, Monica said to me, next to Gerald, be careful, we are going to adopt you.
Wow.
And which they did.
Did she say why?
I don't know, but Gerald agreed.
She needed an extra, and the three kids were enough?
I don't know what I think she needed, and I needed too, so we became very close.
What did it mean to you?
Well, it's a very emotional, what can I say? My life in Sweden is very much connected to people. And to people whom I love and people who have meant very much to me. And Gerald, by far, has been a pillar, a key person in my life here. A key person, a pillar, a person that that would give you a good perception, that would, if I have anything to talk about or to sort out, he would be the one. With Monica, I would go and talk. He would put me back on track. And he was there in good times, in bad times, always give good advice, very much involved in what I was doing. And
he was very interested in your idea of creating Jüdisk Kultur. Now 10 years old, your organization or the organization you're leading. What did he mean then when you came up with the idea and told him, I have this idea?
The idea, I have to say that Gerald was involved much before Jüdisk Kultur is very. Jüdisk Kultur is very. He was involved in everything that I was doing. I did a congress. He was involved. I was working at the Uppsala. He was involved in. He was there all the time. I would go and talk to him. I would ask him for it. He was there from the minute I came to Sweden. So Jüdisk Kultur is very. I have to say that it's something that he, as a prophet, mentioned in 2006. Before Jüdisk Kultur was born, he thought that there was a need, after the congress that I did at Moderna Museet, and he thought that, he said, let's continue with this. Let's continue. Let's build a platform for seminars, for talks, for a Jewish culture. So that was a few years before. That was his idea, but it had to wait a few years. So eventually, in 2012, I think some of the people who were supporting me all the time, some of them are here, like Gabriel Urwitz is here, and Michael Kamras, and Lena Chus, and many others who supported my programs. I was doing pro bono things at the Församlingen, and I guess they got tired of me asking for money. So together, I guess the idea was to really build a platform, an official platform. We didn't expect that it would become such an institution in 10 years, but we wanted to have the possibility and the freedom. And Gerald, of course, was extremely happy and extremely supportive, and Monica also.
Did you never disagree?
Yeah.
Did you say, great, to every idea?
No, not at all.
Then when did you disagree?
Well, he was very honest. He's an honest person. He would tell me when things were not right, or if he thought that I made a mistake, or if he thought that I exaggerate with something. You know, it's too personal. It was, our relationship was so personal, and our conversation, it's very difficult for me to point on. Yeah, but he would definitely tell me to, you know, or upp med hakan, or you know, he was telling me exactly what he thought.
I'm not sure that Gerald would be so happy, or was so happy about the discussion of identity that has become so popular nowadays. But nevertheless, you must have spoken a bit about identity with him, about his Jewish identity, didn't you?
Gerald was always very open and proud of his Jewish identity. He was a member of the Jewish community. He wasn't an insider of the Jewish community. He wasn't a part of the, you know, the core Jewish community people. But we spoke a lot about, well, the fact that he supported the initiative of Jewish culture in Sweden. And for example, I would say that when it comes to Jewish traditions, it was Monica was the motor. I think she, for example, like during...
She was more Jewish than he.
Well, in a sense, because, for example, during COVID, so I call and I say, they couldn't come out, of course, you know, so I said, well, I'm going to Kosheria, and maybe I should buy you some matzah. Do you want something, matzah, something for Pesach? I'm going there, so I can bring a bag and put outside your door. So she says, yes, and please bring the chrein. And I thought, what, the Wittgenstein chrein? What is she know? Like, very funny to see.
Enlighten us who are not
okay,
so
I'll bring
what's
the chrein, she said.
What's the chrein?
Well, chrein, it's a horseradish mix that you put on a, you know, it's one of the things that you eat on Passover, yeah. So anyway, so I think in those terms, she was maybe more, you know, and but I think but I think that Gerald cared very much about his Jewish background. Of course, he came, as you mentioned in your introduction, from a family who fled, who came to Sweden, and I can say something. I wanted to keep it for later, but if you want me, you know, it's very personal, but I will say it now. So. Just this year, you know, Monica had a fantastic talk with Peter Nadash, and Gerald was there. And then we had the Gilel Storch Award, and we had dinner at Manila, and Gerald was there. And all of a sudden, I do the opening of the Holocaust Museum, and Gerald is not there. So I asked Monica, where's Gerald? And I found out that he's not well. I went to Israel, and I heard that he was not doing that well. He was even worse. I called Monica from Hotel Montefiore in Tel Aviv, and she said, not so well. I said, I want to see him. I want to see him. She said, well, it depends. It's from one day to the next. Let's see. So I come back from Israel, and I call, and she says, well, we will be in Stockholm. They were in the country house on Thursday. So if you can come, he will be happy to see you. But let's see how he feels on that day. So lucky for me, I feel so privileged that it was arranged and I could go and see him. He was in his bedroom, and he was lying in his bed, and I came to see him. I was sitting next to him, I was holding him, and the first thing he told me after that, I'm happy to see you, he said, som jude, as a Jew, what you're doing, I found what you're doing very important. Du måste fortsätta. Som en jude. This is the first time that he told me, som en jude. He could have said, well, as a friend, as a this, or as a that. It was the first time that he said, som en jude. As a Jew, I would like to tell you what you're doing is very important, and I want you to continue. And this is something, you know, he was so generous until the very end that he gave me something, and I took it with me because I was devastated. As I said, he was a pillar, one of the, you know, without your pillars, you know, I don't know how you're doing, but it's not, and I was very frightened of not having him. having him say that to me, I felt that he's giving me something, and I will definitely do my best to continue, because it was important for him as a Jew. And for me, this sums up his Jewishness, that he chose to say it, means a lot to me.
And then there's a picture.
Well, you want me to say it now? Okay.
I don't know.
Everything?
No,
Okay.
it's not rehearsed that well.
I thought it was a conversation.
Because she's saying things that I haven't heard before.
I'll show the photo. But
show the photo now.
Okay, I thought it was for the end of this discussion, but I can end my part here now.
We'll save it to the end of the discussion. Save it to the end.
So.
Robert, you met him. You were a slightly younger man then, as we all were. You met him in late 90s. The Swedish committee, the Helsinki committee, was much smaller then than it is today. Your first impression of this man, you came there to look for a job.
Yes, I did.
And your first impression?
There's a combination of me being, of course, terrified, because I really, when I read the ad for the job, I thought that this is really me. So I really wanted that job, and so I was called for an interview, and there, amongst others, were Gerald, and the kind, very warm, friendly person that we all know him to be, was not really my impression that first day. Of course, it was partly me, partly him. I think that I was terrified, as I said, but he was also sort of going through his papers, not really paying attention to me, or sort of. And then I knew that they had some problems with former employees that used the committee as a sort of a stepping stone for the foreign ministry. So then all of a sudden he sort of puts his eyes on me and says, "Well, you're just going to use us as a stepping stone for the foreign ministry. You're going to leave us after a short while." And sort of luckily enough, I got my grip together. So I said, "Well, if I understand the position right, and if I'm doing the job that you want me to do, they wouldn't want me at the foreign ministry." And that is sort of
that was the right
turned
answer.
Around, yeah.
That was the right answer.
I think that was the sort of the
He skipped
shift.
his papers and started looking at
Exactly.
you with some interest.
So he did, yeah.
What kind of committee was the Swedish Helsinki committee that you applied for a job at? It must have developed a little bit since that last meeting.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it was a very small committee. We were 3 people employed, and Gerald was very much involved in the daily operations as a working chairman. But what I remember the most is really the lovely evenings at Gerald and Monica's apartment, where they had these fantastic meetings as a relatively young man at the time, meeting all these and hearing all these fantastic people really open up my perspectives, and that is really what I think that Gerald really meant the world to me, in both professionally, but also for me as a person. And I think that really made a difference in so many aspects.
You must have thought, or have the question in your mind, that what drives this man? What makes him tick? Why is this man, this important man with this fine family, this beautiful flat, blah, 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 blah. Why is he dealing with a committee of 3 people dealing with civil rights in the world? What drove him?
I think that one of the things that we shared was really the possibility to be really committed, but not getting too attached. Because if you get too attached, you also it's a sort of a downgoing spiral. There are so many people working with human rights and similar issues that really, it gets too much. But I think that he managed really to find a balance and find the importance and keep it really on a intellectual level, but still with, of course, with a dedication and commitment and a warm heart. Somewhat as Lizzie explained, that he really saw people, he listened to people, But it also, okay, cheer up, move on. He had it was only one way forward, upwards and onwards, in a very positive way. So I think that, of course, the possibility of making a difference with the network that he had, the stability, of course, in his private life, but also to be in the right place, in the right time in the history.
How did he deal with failures?
Sorry?
How did he deal with failures? Because you must have failed. It's a tricky thing going around the world and talking about civil rights. How did he deal with failures?
I think that is a really good question. I don't think, I would also go to myself, well, of course there were failures, but that was part of the game. Of course you need failures, otherwise you don't know how to improve or to do an even better job. That was not really an issue that we discussed. We dealt with it and just moved on. I think that was really, and that is also the core of Gerald. He was an optimist. Of course, I mean, given how the world looks like, it's quite easy to be depressed, but I mean, what's the alternative? You just lay down and die.
Did you ever ask him where his optimism came from?
Yeah, well, Gerald had so many lovely stories. If I could remember 1% of all the stories, I would be a rich man, because I never laughed so much as with the company of Gerald. He had such a wonderful humor and so many stories.
And that good humor never failed him.
Sorry?
That good humor never failed him. It was always there as a kind of resource, a human resource.
Absolutely. And I think that is also when going into, I mean, it's difficult. You don't need to dwell on it. You need to focus on the positives.
From my meetings with Gerald, I got the feeling that he's good at trusting people. I had the pleasure of being trusted in some respects when it came to the Swedish Committee Against Anti-Semitism. He trusted you.
I hope so.
This is a difficult thing, trusting people.
Yeah.
Did you see him trust people that way in his work as well?
Absolutely,
as a
but
I
think it's
tool.
Yeah, I think that is also strongly connected to what you said about failures. I mean, if you're going to interact with other people, you have to be prepared on being disappointed, because some people are really, not so good people, as it turns out, along the way, and some people are just fantastic, and you need to dare to and to sort of take a risk, and he was absolutely prepared to take a risk, but also, not afraid of calling an end to a relationship if it was necessary. And I think that was really also one of the strengths with Gerald.
So one of the problems optimistic people have and people who are good at trusting is breaking up a relation when it's not good, cutting things short. Was he good at that? Saying this is not working?
I would say it depends on the person and the situation and so forth. But as with many other people, of course, sometimes it's more difficult, and sometimes it goes quite quick. He was quite rational, and from my point of view, I think that, coming in to the organization at a relatively young age, and we had quite a lot of resources in relative terms, and we did quite a lot of work in the Balkans, but also growingly in Eastern Europe. And sometimes you were put into situations where you really had to make some difficult decisions. But I always felt that I had the 150% support from Gerald, and that really made it possible for me to actually act and be tough if necessary, and really deal with really difficult issues sometimes. That support was really, that was invaluable.
You have your story that you would conclude with on this subject when we're talking about the person as much as the deed. But
Yes.
tell us your
I
story.
want to go back also to what you asked me, because what I was listening to you about what Gerald meant to me. So I would say that Monica and Gerald, for me, my husband Stefan is here, he knows that I always say, when I look at Monica and Gerald, I'm not afraid of anything. When I look at Monica and Gerald, I'm not afraid of it. It's like, everything is great, you know, they are such an inspiring couple, such an inspiring, you know, I really, you know, and I would say, look at Gerald all the time, look at Gerald as an example, and Stefan would say, but I'm not Gerald. You know?
Poor him. Poor him. You still got time. Men develop.
So I want to say, Gerald is, first of all, always the younger man in the room, right? You go into the room, he's the youngest. And he, as you say, very curious, genuinely curious. And it's a person that for me was a friend, but also a father figure, also a man to fall in love with, also a confidant, all that, because I couldn't find the words when he asked me, I was thinking now. So all that was Gerald. That was his loss is quite hard, of course. But I wanted to end with a family story that I heard from Monica, and that his father, Zygmunt.
We need a picture.
We need a picture of, yeah. So that's Gerald and his father, Zygmunt. And so I heard that throughout the years, it became like a slogan, a family slogan, Tak Mundi, Mundi Zygmunt. Everything, you know, every time, you know, just like, so it became like something like Tak Mundi, Tak Mundi, Tak Mundi, thanking for maybe something good that happened, or, you know, like. And so I heard that just before Gerald died, he said again, Tak Mundi. And the way I think the family interpreted, or at least what I heard from Monica, is that what he meant is not just thank you, but thank you to this person who had the insight to take the family in time, his whole family, from Austria to Sweden. It happened to be Sweden, but just who had the insight and the courage and the possibility to take the family there, and which resulted in everything else that Gerald, of course, had in his life. And this is the last photo, and this is the family, of course. His wonderful and big family with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And this is something that is, I think, is a very warm story about Gerald and about the way he approached his family and about his father and what he managed to do.
We'll join him then.
So we will say
Tak
Mundi.
Tak Mundi. Tak Mundi.
Yes.
There's going to be, thank you, both of you, Lizzie and Robert, for sharing your events. We got a... Hey. Thank you. And there will be some music, and you could think about what they said until the next panel comes up. Please, Daniel and Andreas. Anders Paulsson or Daniel Karlsson. You haven't heard the last of them. I can promise you that. It's time for two new guests on stage, Becca Vuccio and Jon Stauffer. Please have your seats. We're going to talk more about his deed and what he did, and it's going to become as personal as before. There's no way, I think, to differ the man who did things from the man from whom he was. Becca Vuccio, you have for 30 years been the regional director in the Balkans for Open Society Foundation, better known to most of us as George Soros organization. Now you have your own organization, My Balkans, promoting art, art and literature throughout the whole Balkans. Yes. That's a mission.
It seems that I can't get rid of the Balkans.
Anyway. No, well...
I have to be in that milieu all my life, yes.
I gather you will talk more about that. And Jon Stauffer, who is legal head at Civil Rights Defenders and deputy head of the whole organization. Becca, I have to ask you, you're based in New York, but you originally come from Yugoslavia.
That's correct.
But when and where did you meet Gerald Nagler?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll make it very short. In 1991, I joined the Soros Foundation, or the Open Society Foundations, and it was around that time, maybe 92, 93. I can't really pin down the exact year because it was so long ago, that Gerald came to New York, and at almost every visit he came and visited Open Society Foundations because he was very good friends with, at that time, President Arja Nair, who was my immediate boss. So one day...
The man I told the people about, who put him on track.
Yes, who put them on the right track, helped him definitely establish the Swedish Helsinki Committee, but also then the whole deal when he left and went for Vienna. So, but I think the two of them, if I'm not mistaken, and Monica can certainly know that better, met through Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she was both friends with the Nagler family as well as with the Nair family. So I think that was the connection between the two of them. But nevertheless, so one day he was in New York, and Arja called me in his office and said, I would like to introduce you to somebody. And that was the time of the wars in the Balkans, and I was almost every day meeting yet another donor, because they were all coming to the Open Society Foundations, because we were there already present, and at that time in 91, 92, we were one of the biggest donors in the Balkans and very much focused. And obviously my office was very much involved in all these givings and everything, grants and so on. So I said, oh God, one more time.
You were a bit fed up with donors?
Yeah, I was just totally fed up because I had to spend hours explaining to these ignorant donors who had no idea, you know, where these cities are. I had a map of the Balkans in my office, and I had a long stick. And I was, you know, so we have an office here, we have an office here. So I was showing them because they were just so ignorant, they had no idea. Anyway, so all of a sudden I met this guy. You know, first of all, he knew where the Balkans are. At least I saw that from the first sentence.
So you put away your papers and looked at him with some interest.
He pronounced it so well. And I said, are you of Serbian origin? Are you of Croatian origin? He said, no, but there was this charm that came out of him immediately. And as Lizzie said, his eyes were just like all over the office. And I said, this is something different here. Let's see, you know, very elegantly dressed, always in his tweed, you know, with button-down shirt, very well, you know, all matched. And I said, this is something different. So that's how we met.
And that was the beginning of a long and giving friendship.
Yes, very much.
You met him a lot in New York, but I suppose you met him in the Balkans as well.
Absolutely. It's an interesting thing because we worked together, and actually we worked through the Helsinki at that time, Swedish Helsinki Committee and Open Society Foundations. and I was based in New York, he was based in Sweden, but we met mostly in New York, and then we met several times in the Balkans, because when he would come to New York, he would always call me. We had coffee, tea, lunch, dinner. I went to their house, the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, I'm sorry. That's a joke, that's a joke. I
There
know.
was an
That's
argument in the family.
That was a joke, that's a family
yesterday.
issue,
Felipe,
right?
you can ask in the mingle.
It's not
afterwards.
east, but it's west, on the Upper West Side. Yes, but also I knew when he was traveling, I could sometimes fix it so that we're at the same time, either in Sarajevo, Belgrade, Skopje, Pristina, wherever he was going.
Did you ever ask yourself, when you met him in the Balkans during the war, harsh times, harsh countries sometimes, did you ever ask yourself, what does this well-dressed, well-mannered, pretty wealthy man who could do anything in life, what is he really doing in the Balkans? Did you ever ask yourself that? And did you ask him?
I'd never asked him, but...
Why? Weren't you curious?
No, I was not, because by the time, and from the first meeting, I really knew who he was. And I knew what kind of a dedication, what kind of elan vital he has about the inequality, about human rights, about issues that we were doing together, his organization and our organization. So there was no need to ask him, because in our conversations, whenever we had them, we talked about so many things, and he was so knowledgeable that, I knew he was so eager to help. And you're right, these times were terrible, amazing, hard to travel. Sometimes people were not even welcome to some parts of the former Yugoslavia because of the regimes. They were stopped at the borders. They were, controlled their passports, names, and so on and so on. But so I did not ask him. I think because we two understood each other so much that we're doing this for the good and for the future, for the democracy, for the building of the open societies, for the building of really something that we all had passion inside us. So that's why there was no need to ask him.
You represented one of the biggest organizations, world-known, Soros Foundation. Soros was at that time already known for playing a major role in Europe and on these fields, civil rights and stuff like that. What did the Swedish Helsinki Committee bring that made it so important for your big organization to work with this organization, as we heard from Robert, 3 people?
First of all,
why were they important to you?
First of all, I think that what was important was really people who worked there. And Gerald really represented that organization and the dedication that existed. And as I said, as a joke, there were different donors than the many, many donors. There were the donors who understood why they're doing what they're doing, who understood the historical moment when the war was happening, and they knew exactly what they want to do. But the helpful thing was that our 2 organizations matched in a way. Yes, you're right, OSF was rather big and this was a smaller organization, but the idea behind both of the organizations was the same. Also, many of the programs that the OSF did matched exactly what was the Swedish Helsinki Committee doing at that time, even today. I know that today also OSF is one of the donors that helps them. So for instance, we did rule of law, and that's exactly what the Helsinki Swedish Committee was doing. We were very much concerned about freedom of expression, and that's exactly what they were doing. So we were matched in a way, and that's why many things that we did together, and I can explain actually how we did it together, because this was not like we give money, they give money, and then the money goes somewhere. No, actually every grant that we gave and that they gave were very thoughtful grants, especially when Robert came as the executive director. We and my foundations in the Balkans, because we had the foundation in each of the countries of the Balkans, those were very thoughtful grants. We had the reason why exactly this particular grantee is going to get a grant. And there was this mutual understanding that made us do what we did for so many years together.
It's obvious that he convinced you of his dedication and his interest, but what made Serbs, Croatians, Bosniaks listen to him and to his tiny little organization? What authority did he enter these smoky rooms in the Balkans with?
I think that, as I said, there was something very different about him. There was this aura about him when he enters the room, the way he walked, the way he talked to people, the way how he sat in the chair, the way how he talked to everybody the same way, no matter it's a friend, enemy, or opponent. It was just the same way that he talked. So
Did he even stop smoking?
No.
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 Not that.
No.
He didn't get that far.
No.
But it sounds like the born diplomat.
Absolutely. I think it's even more than that. Diplomats can sometimes be very harsh and cold, but there was this warmth that we all felt. And, I knew that if he walks into this organization, that he's going to charm everybody, and he did. So it took him so short period of time that he would really come out and said, okay, they're pretty good, we can do something. There was something in a way how he talked to people, which, I don't know anybody else. And, I met a lot of people working for the OSF about these hard issues that we were trying to solve, who talked to people the same way that he did. And his questions that he asked people were something extremely special. They were very simple. They were short questions and very simple questions.
Like?
But why do you want to help this organization and not this? It's a simple question. Why do you want to do this and not this? For instance. But the answers sometimes to those simple questions were not easy, because it was an honest question that he asked you, and he asked you the way that you had to actually look at him in his eyes and answer that. He did not take superficiality, nonsense, or anything, and these were not like blah, blah, blah questions where he would prove that he is smart by asking this extremely long question. No, the questions were really to the point. And I told you when we talked the other day, at first I was kind of scared of him. Well, when I got to know him, because every time when he would call and he said, oh my God, Gerald is coming, I better brush up on Kosovo and what's happening in Kosovo and this, he's going to certainly ask me this. So at first I was a little bit afraid of his questions, because I wanted
passing
to be
exams every conversation.
somewhat, yes, somewhat passing an exam, and I of course wanted to be perfect in front of him to charm him as well. I wanted also to kind of say, okay, this is friendship aside. We can go to have dinner and whatever, but this is now business. So we had also that kind of but later on, when I got to know him better, when I met Monica, when I knew Nicholas, of course. It was an easy way to talk to him. But I think that, back to your question about the Serbs, the Croats, the Kosovars, and so on, I think that his personality was such that he just was an easy person to deal with, but very just, extremely strict sometimes, and very to the point. You could not make up things and lie in front of him, because it was so visible that he would listen to you, he would be very patient, and then he would say, yes, but then second short question that kills you because you can't answer that question because you were lying, of course. You know. So I think that many colleagues, friends, grantees realize that. Yeah.
The last question before we jump to today's problems and challenges.
Sure.
Is he remembered in the Balkans? Is there an actual legacy that do people remember him and the work he did?
I would say that today, among the people who are involved still in human rights issues, he is an personality that cannot be matched with anybody else. People not only remember him, but people talk about him all the time, people who are involved. He is, if I could say, I have a couple of notes here, some quotes actually, from people that know him, that knew him, that worked with him. For instance, Tanja Petovar, who maybe some of you know, she was somebody who also, in a way, introduced me to Monica and the rest of the family. She said to me the other day on the phone that he was an irreplaceable builder of human rights agendas in the Balkans. Undoubtedly one of the most important figures in the international human rights movement, who helped establish the office in Yugoslavia first, and then the offices in other parts of the Balkans. So that, you know, tells you what his legacy is. He was a unique and inspiring humanist, and from the first time when he visited Belgrade, which was in May of 1988, till the end of his life, he was the most faithful and loyal and most consistent and true friend to the civil society in Serbia. And these are the quotes from people who worked with him, who knew him, and who actually, as many of us, are feeling this huge gap with his departure.
My childhood was in a way very serious. Those were bad times, and I remember coming with my parents, receiving refugees from the concentration camps which came to Sweden after 45. You don't forget that. There was also the constant fear of Nazi occupation of Sweden.
Having grown up under the shadow of World War II and deeply influenced by eyewitness stories of the unbelievable atrocities committed by the Nazis, Gerald Nagler decided to abandon his 25-year career in business and devote his life to fighting for human rights. Nagler derived his inspiration from Russian Nobel Peace Prize laureate and dissident Andrei Sakharov, who urged people in both East and West to unite and form independent organizations to ensure human rights were respected in accordance with the 1975 Helsinki Final Act. Signed by 35 nations, the Helsinki Final Act addressed a range of global issues, including establishing post-World War II borders and preventing any repetition of the Nazi persecution of dissenters.
The first Helsinki group was established in Moscow by 12 brave men and women who were later all badly discriminated, exiled and imprisoned. In 1982, I was encouraged to start the Swedish Helsinki Committee. I mobilized 100 prominent Swedish men and women to back up on this project. We started in our kitchen at home. We had no budget, we had no staff, we had no office, but we had a mission.
Countless and sometimes risky trips were made to countries behind the Iron Curtain to document human rights violations and put countries that did not comply with the agreement in the spotlight. Gerald Nagler also co-founded the International Helsinki Federation for Human Rights, which served as an umbrella organization for the national committees. He led the work of the Helsinki Federation for 10 years as Secretary General.
We were traveling in all these repressive countries behind the Iron Curtain, meeting fascinating men and women who had been working with risk of their freedom and life for democracy, human rights and freedom. To sit in the kitchen with Andrei Sakharov and Yelena Bonner and hear that story are highlights in my life. You learn so much about courage, about ethics, about morale. I deeply admire them. I met many times the famous dissident Václav Havel. I went to see him at his summer dacha. And the first thing I said when we came, knowing that all the rooms and houses where dissidents were bugged, my first question was, should we take a walk? And he laughed and he said, not really, because they will listen to us wherever we are, pointing to a house built 100 meters from his dacha, where the KGB had put up a listening device center, following his voice wherever it was. This shows how sick the society was.
Gerald Nagler was himself arrested by the KGB and declared persona non grata, but never let himself be intimidated in his fight for democracy and human rights. Under his leadership, the International Helsinki Federation received much praise for its work, which has also been attributed as contributing to a significant degree towards the fall of the Iron Curtain.
You cannot say for sure which impact did our work have. And I believe that the work for these human rights activists participated heavily to the fact that the wall came down without spilling of blood. I deeply admire all these unknown men and women who were fighting and never were recognized, never became famous. They did a very important job. They were heroes in the dark.
But the period of joy after the fall of the wall was a short one. The war in the Balkans posed a new tough challenge for Gerald Nagler and his colleagues. Helsinki committees were started in Serbia, Bosnia and Croatia, and work goes on to this very day to document human rights violations committed during the bloody conflict and, if possible, to prosecute the guilty parties. In 2009, the Swedish Helsinki Committee took on a new form and was renamed Civil Rights Defenders. It currently operates in more than 30 countries on 4 continents.
You see human rights violations all over, and it is sad to see the negative development in some countries such as Hungary, Russia, Poland, Turkey, etc. However, I am very optimistic. The opposite is only destructive. I think that it is extremely positive to see that human rights is today on everyone's agenda. I am very happy to see that my little Helsinki baby, born in our kitchen, is now this strong global organization, Civil Rights Defenders.
Thank you. John, that's a legacy. That was a small rehearsal, but then the challenge or the mission given over to you by Gerald, this is you've got work to do.
Yes.
Your organization is totally different now. You have over 100 employees. You work in 30 countries or something.
It's actually more than 50.
It's
so
more
it's
than
grown
50,
since the film.
50 countries.
Yes.
But do you still feel you walk in the footsteps of Gerald at the small organization that he started?
Definitely. I think Gerald is still very present in the organization. He was throughout as an inspiration, as a role model for us in the organization. I worked with Gerald to some extent, but also people that are coming in new to the organization now still, are very interested in the history of the organization, interested in knowing the history, knowing Gerald and what he's done throughout the years.
Do you recognize the experience that Becca had, that he asks questions in a very nice but very decisive way?
Very pointy questions. I can really relate to that, and my story, first meeting Gerald, is not very long, it's very short. He often came to I started 10 years ago when he would regularly come to the office, not to meet with me, but he would meet with Robert. And they would talk, and Robert would bring me into the room, and he would then immediately start to ask these very pointy and short, but very difficult questions. And as Becca said, I was also a bit scared of these meetings.
Fascinating how such a friendly man can scare the shit out of you.
Yeah, because he was at the same time extremely friendly, both polite but also warm and a friendly person.
Today, at the time you talked about the focus point was the Balkans and the war. What's the focus point today? What's your biggest? Where do you have to put most efforts when it comes to civil rights?
We still put a lot of focus and resources into our work in Eurasia region, where the organization started once upon a time, and the Western Balkans is still the biggest parts of our work is still in that regions, but we have spread.
Making progress when it comes to the situation, or is it a standstill?
I mean, it's quite obvious that we haven't, the work of civil society haven't been a success in terms of stopping or preventing what's happening now with war in Ukraine and a very clear downturn when it comes to democracy in many parts of the world. We have expanded, as was said in the film by Gerald, to other parts of the world. So today also working in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And we have staff, in many places around the world. We newly opened an office in Tbilisi in Georgia.
Are you listened to as Gerald was listened to in the Balkans? Do
Yes.
you feel that when the civil rights defenders comes along, people listen, states listen?
Yes, we've grown into a big organization, but also an organization that is important for civil society across the world, for human rights defenders, organizations working locally, regionally in many parts of the world. We have become important. And we try to strengthen them, amplify their voices to make them heard. And we are an organization that is listened to, and not least in the Swedish context, because that's something that has developed as well. In addition to, to expanding internationally, we have become the main human rights watchdog in the Swedish context as well.
So is this something that is growing more and more important, looking at the country here itself?
Yes, it has. And
it's not just a byproduct.
No, it isn't. It was a deliberate, strategic decision 10 years back when I started to really expand this work that had been done previously in relation to Sweden, to expand that, make it long-term, and really have an impact as a Swedish organization, realizing recognizing the importance of also looking at your own backyard and taking care of human rights issues that we have here as well.
When Gerald started his work, together with other people, like some of those who we mentioned here, and when you started your work, there were so many individuals putting so much personal effort and putting their personal authority into it. And then they were able to create an organization like the Swedish Helsinki Committee, which was probably similar to a lot of other Helsinki committees around Europe. Now you're a big organization. You're 100 people. It can't be described as a one man's or one woman's work anymore. But do you still need that kind of personal involvement from people? Entering the institution, supporting the institution, giving authority to the organization, or is that a past period?
No, I think, we need role models like Gerald to guide us in our work, but we need individuals, people to stand up for human rights, to stand up for democracy, to play a role in defending human rights and democracy, and to really protect what we have and to make things better around the world. We need leaders, but we also need a lot of people to really make an effort in the way that we can. We can't all be Gerald Naglers, starting several organizations, but we can contribute to the work that is being done by civil society organizations. And there are many ways of doing that, contributing financially or, speaking out in defense of human rights and democracy, the rule of law, and speaking out against authoritarian policies and politics. That is super important if we want to change what we're seeing now, the democratic downturn, change that into progress instead.
I have a last but huge question for both of you. We heard that Gerald was optimistic, and that he meant that the opposite is just destructive. Do we have reasons today to be optimistic when it comes to you? And you will have to answer, but you get 5 seconds to answer. Do we have reasons to be optimistic when it comes to civil rights on a European or a world scale?
I think, to go back to Gerald, I think we need to be optimistic. Otherwise, we can just, stop. And that's not an option. We need to be optimistic and think that there are ways to change things and make things better. And I think as we see, the authoritarian regimes strengthened, we also see a counter reaction to that very clearly. We see that across the globe, how people are coming together with a different narrative, looking at the future in a different way and taking action to do that, whether that's human rights, climate change, or any issue that is important for democracy. We see that, and I think that is optimistic. We see young people working on human rights, working on issues related to climate change. And I also wanted to mention something that Gerald did that will, leave a legacy in the organization. He, and together with Robert, they created the Gerald Nagler Human Rights Traineeship, which gives possibility to young lawyers, newly examined lawyers, to work at Civil Rights Defenders for a year to get experience of human rights work, practical human rights work. Lawyers that would then end up in different places in society as decision makers. They will be important people in the future. And I think that those things give hope.
And you, Becca, can you be optimistic? If he calls you from somewhere and said, how's it going, Becca? What's your answer?
We must be optimistic.
We're doomed to optimism.
Absolutely. Without must, but must, and of course, what John said, then we can pack our bags and go. But that's not what we're here for. I want to say a couple of words about the legacy, because I feel a huge responsibility sitting here representing the Balkans in a way, and this amazing work that he did internationally. But I need to mention some organizations. I have to. This is a must, because these are the organizations that not only OSF, but the Swedish Helsinki Committee at the time, and today the Civil Rights Defenders are still helping, have been helping, and without these organizations, neither must nor being optimistic would not exist, because these organizations bring today this optimism. Why are we doing this job when we know that still there are perpetrators, that still there is terrible things happening, not only in the Balkans, look at the war that is happening in Ukraine. So, I want to mention, of course, the establishment of the Helsinki Committee in Yugoslavia in 1988. We are talking about, for those who know a little bit of the Balkan history, we're talking about the beginning of the Milosevic era, right, before the wars. And then, of course, as the film said as well, Helsinki committees all over Croatia, in Croatia, Serbia, as the country was falling apart, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Slovenia, Montenegro, of course. Center for Cultural Decontamination, Borka Pavicevic, is an amazing accomplishment that Gerald nurtured as a baby. This is an amazing center that exists in Belgrade, Serbia, because it was the air, everything was contaminated with the filth and with tyranny. So this center still exists, it still does excellent work, but the Swedish Helsinki Committee was crucial in their existence with other donors as well, but crucial, and unfortunately Borka is not with us anymore, but she was really the leading figure in that organization. Media, I don't even know where to start or end, because media and the involvement of the Swedish Helsinki Committee in media, all the media, all over the country, was one of the most accomplished things that from helping Oslobođenje and Dani in war-torn Sarajevo to forming the new small, unfortunately not, that's one of the failures, Reporter in Banja Luka, for instance. We did that together with Open Society, but B92, TV stations in Macedonia, Kosovo, all over the place, helping Feral Tribune in Croatia, Novi List, and so on and so on. It's just endless, right? So huge accomplishments. Fund for Humanitarian Law. Gerald was crucial in bringing the idea of transitional justice to Serbia. He was somebody who really fought for that, and together with other donors helped to form the Fund for Humanitarian Law, amazing Nataša Kandić, who is still there, who is still pushing and fighting and so on. He was critically involved in the establishment of the ICTY, International Criminal Tribunal from the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, and we know the court is not working anymore, but there are people who have been really prosecuted and so on. Anyway, so there's so many things that are left behind him. So optimism, yes. It's not yet, the Balkans are not a finished story, of course. That's why we have civil rights defenders working still there. But we have to believe in that there is a possible change. So if he calls me, I will certainly tell him that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Becca Vuciu. Thank you, Jon Stauffer.
Thank you.
And before we part, there will be some more music. So, Lizzie, would you like to say?
No, I want Maynard to say.
I want Maynard to say. Where's Maynard? There's Maynard. It's your turn now, Maynard, for citing the Jewish prayers for the dead. El Mare, Rachinim, and Kaddish. So would you please stand up?
אל מול רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כי זוהר הרקיע מסירים את נשמת אחינו שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים אז תראהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום המשכבו ונאמר amen. Och nu kommer jag att läsa upp Kaddish-bönen, men Kaddish-bönen har ingenting att göra med döden. Kaddish-bönen är ett sätt att bekräfta livet. Och jag tänkte på det här under programmet nu. Och så när jag läser Kaddish så vill jag tro att det är ett sätt att tacka Gud att vi hade den mannen. Och att allt som den mannen lämnade efter sig kommer att vara till stöd för oss. Så det kan ni tänka på när jag läser den här texten. Yitkadal v'yitkadash me rabba Bi'alma divra chirute V'yamlich malchute b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael Ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen Yehe shemei rabba mevorach li'alam u'lalmei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach ויתפאר, ויתרומם, ויתנשא, ויתהדר, ויתעלה, ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Vill du ha ett par sista ord, Lizzie?
Yes.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Svante, Anders, Daniel, Becca, Robert, and Stefan. John, I'm sorry. Yes, so before we go out and have our little reception, I want to share something with you, just a little thing that, according to what Maynard just said, thank you, Maynard, for this beautiful Kaddish and Elmaleh, that we should remember Gerald, and we're here to celebrate him, celebrate his life. And so I found out, Monica told me that after Gerald died, there was a tiny piece of paper that was found in his belongings. And that piece of paper we can show here. That's what it says. Se är med sorg att han har död, tänk med glädje att han har levat. Oh, something like that, right? And I think this is exactly what we should think about when we go out and take our wine and mingle and speak about Gerald. I think this is how he would have wanted us to think about him and remember him. But I know how I am going to remember him. Give it to me, Johan.
Tack för att ni kom. Jag tackar också alla medverkande, och som kanske pappa Sigmund och mamma Blanka hade sagt, kom gut nach Hause. Efter lite mingel där ute. Varsågoda där ute. Tack ska ni ha.